Good evening to all the panelists and participants of the panel's discussion on National Education Policy 2020, the way forward. At the outset, let me take this opportunity to introduce the moderator for this evening, Ms. Rageshri Niyogi, Head Marketing, Collins Learning. Rageshri Niyogi has over 18 years of experience working in the fields of education and media. She has been a key part of the Collins product and strategy team for over 3 years. Prior to joining Collins, Rageshri held a number of positions in the editorial and content divisions of Oxford University Press, NDTV, and MetLife, among others. Rageshri has a master's degree in physics from Delhi University and a master's degree in business communication and digital media from Tilburg University in the Netherlands. Ms. Niyogi, we request you to take this session forward.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nidhi, for that introduction. I hope all of you are keeping safe and healthy. I'm Rageshri from Collins Learning India, and I'm going to be the moderator for the session today. Last week, we had a great discussion on NEP 2020, its different aspects, and what these mean for school leaders, educators, and students. We also discussed that the real challenge lies in its implementation. We recognize that the NEP is a very crucial document and couldn't have come at a better time when all of us are adapting to the new normal resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. We are witnessing a paradigm shift in not just how education is delivered, but also redefining what comprises education altogether. Today, we will discuss some more aspects of NEP 2020 with our eminent panelists. It is my great honor to introduce all of them to you. They are not just educationists, but also life shapers. I'll introduce them in the alphabetical order and do it very quickly, keeping the time in mind, because we want to have a great discussion with all of them. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Dr. Ajit Prasad Jain, had a personal emergency and couldn't make it to the session today. So he won't be able to join us today for the session. So next, I would like to welcome Mrs. Anjana Mollik, former principal of Vidya Bharati School. Mrs. Anjana Mollik was a teacher in Vidya Bharati Girls High School since 1984. She was the head teacher and principal of the primary section since 1998. She was awarded the Best Principal of the Year 2019 by the Science Olympiad Foundation. Currently, Mrs. Mollik is a member of the governing body of the Vidya Bharati Trust, as well as the member of the managing committee of the school. She's also associated with My Cool Q, a company engaged in mentoring school-going students and senior adults on the nuances of the English language. An active worker with Bharat Scouts and Guides, she currently holds the position of District Commissioner Guides, Kolkata District. She's also an executive member of the Bengal Table Tennis Association, as well as South Kolkata TT Association, and is a member of Nalini Dutt Memorial Association as a social worker. She has authored, edited, and reviewed several books for children, mainly in English and history. She conducts workshops for educators across the country. A master's in English with B.Ed and TTC training, she has taken a keen interest in education for the second generation learners and parent counseling. Welcome to the session, Mrs. Mollik.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Ken Nanakan. Dr. Nanakan completed his BA honors and a PhD from King's College London University. He is a passionate educationist who strongly advocates integrated learning and has a book by the same name. He's elated that integrated learning might soon become a reality. Dr. Nanakan is chancellor of the ACT group of institutions with numerous schools in their network. He's vice chairman of the Global Challenges Forum Geneva, working in collaboration with the UN Institute of Training and Research. Having written over 20 books on religion, environment, education, management, and health, Dr. Nanakan teaches all over the world with a prime focus on training teachers. He's also an accomplished artist and a musician. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Nanakan. Next, I would like to welcome someone who does not need much introduction, Dr. Neelam Kaur, MBBS MS Ophthalmology, Director of Akal Academy, a chain of 130 schools and 2 universities. Dr. Kaur is also the advisor, health and education of the Kalighar Trust and runs de-addiction centers and charitable hospital. Volunteering at Baru Sahib for the last 25 years in the field of education and medical services, including Akal Charitable Hospital, de-addiction centers, public health, College of Nursing. She has masters in hospital administration under the spiritual guidance of revered Saint Iqbal Singh Ji. retired Director Agriculture of Himachal Pradesh Government of India, President of the Calicut Trust. Trained as an ophthalmologist and started volunteering at a charitable hospital to render medical services in the remote and distant location of Sirmaur, where the medical services were non-existent. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Kaur. Finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Raymond Fernandez, Director of Education at Shivnada School, a firm believer that the singular purpose of education is to make better human beings of all of us. He has always placed honesty, integrity, and empathy at the pinnacle of values to be imbibed in order to bring about a progressive change in the world. Prior to joining Shivnada School, Mr. Fernandez was the academic head at Euroschool International Mumbai, serving in the capacity of a deputy vice president for all the 10 schools across India. Here, he was responsible for bringing out about a variety of innovations in education, especially in EdTech. His career, spanning over 25 years, began as a teacher at Campion School, Mumbai. Thereafter, he went to lead various responsibilities at Ecole Mondiale World School. He also has been the founder vice principal at JBCN International School, Mumbai, Oshiwara branch. An honors graduate in chemistry from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, Mr. Fernandez did his bachelor's in education from the same institution. He earned his master's in education from the Institute of Chartered Financial Analysts of India, Hyderabad, and Master of Arts in Education from Bath University, UK. Welcome to the session, Mr. Fernandez. On behalf of Collins Learning, I would like to thank all of you for joining the panel discussion today. The National Education Policy 2020 primarily focuses on creating a knowledge workforce by providing holistic education right from formative to higher stages of education and making it universally accessible. I would like to take this opportunity to get the views of each panelist on two aspects of the NEP that will lead to a monumental shift in how education is delivered in India at the moment. I would request the panelists to be mindful of the time. So can we begin with Mrs. Malik, please? Mrs. Malik, your views on the NEP and how two aspects, how they are going to change the education system in India.
Hello, thank you. As an educator and as a teacher of the primary section of a big school, I feel that the new education policy will really bring in a lot of change, not only changes, but a lot of opening to the children of primary level, and systematic teaching provided. Now it is, and I think it is a bit too early to say also, because it has just been launched. We just know what the policy is about. But we need to see what the syllabus is coming and how that is implemented throughout the country. Now that we have these different boards, the state boards, the CBSE, the ICSE, that really hampers different children in a different way when they go for their higher studies. Now this system, I at least think that will bring an equal quality of the children in an equal basis throughout the country. Especially the division that has been made, the pre-primary, that is the fundamental stage. Then it goes the next stage. That fundamental stage till class 2 is very much required, because all these years the pre-primary classes were only till the KG, the kindergartens, and then from kindergarten to class 1 became a big jump to the children, since mostly the kindergarten classes were done separately in the schools in schools or near their houses or things like that, not in a big school. And when they joined a big school in class 1, at the age of class 5 or 6, then it became a lot of a big jump for them. Now that we have this fundamental years till class 2, so in my opinion, I think that will really help the children. that will really, really help the children to gradually learn their system, their reading, writing skills, and that will again gradually, when they go to the next stage, from 3 to 8, that is again a very that this stage will help them out to be in with the standard of the school or classes or whatever the syllabus is made of. And this is, we welcome this system, the new policy that is coming up, because another thing that I felt by just going through the policy was the entry-exit of subjects. The entry, which is really helpful for the children from 9 to 12, when they are allowed to enter and exit from their own choice of subjects. Then it becomes very easy for them to do their schooling, the schooling years. It is not, then I feel that it is not a big pressure on them. And as described, that it will be a core, the syllabus will be only the core matters of, yes, core matters of according to their age or according to their standard. So that will help them out to develop their learning power and also retaining them.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think this formalizing pre-primary education, because all the private schools had it, but the government schools really didn't, have that as a formalized part of their schooling system. So making that as a foundational stage as formal, so that is a huge thing, huge jump that has happened in our education system. And that will also help them bridge that gap that was there from pre-primary to class 1. So that has also taken place. So thank you so much. Yes, those are two valid points. And entry and exit of students again. So students who have not been able to complete education for some reason at certain point can come back to it and complete it. So they don't really have to start from ground zero, from zero again. So that's another point that the policy talks about. Yes. So those are the two crucial takeaways that you have from the NEP. Great. Thank you so much for your insights, Mrs. Mollik. So now I would like to request Dr. Kaur for her views on this. 2 aspects of NEP that you think will create a monumental shift in how education is delivered currently in India. Dr. Kaur?
Hello.
I think.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the views shared just now. Like rightly said, the changes which have come up in early years education, which were much required. Like when you just introduced us and when we joined here as medical doctors in this small place in a remote Himachal hill state, which was just one school at that time with 7 students. And under the divine guidance of Honorable Babaji, who retired as a Director Agriculture from Government of Himachal Pradesh. And today we have mushroomed into 130 schools and 2 universities. So what we realized when we joined this in 1992 was a glaring gap between the teacher preparedness and the teacher training. And it has been almost like now 3 decades. And I still feel there is a lot which has to be done in these 2 areas. Now we have approximately 5,000 teachers working in these deep rural pockets. And we as an institution believe in hand-holding. And so we have endeavored to say almost like have almost 130 webinars or teacher training sessions for our teacher during this last 4 to 5 months. Because our teachers were not trained how to lead a virtual classroom. So this training was very, very important for them. And what happened, the teachers learned with the best example of experiential learning. Like they didn't know how to lead a virtual classroom, but they learned like by just having that concrete experience and then reflecting on their observations. And then they started actively experimenting. And with each endeavor was to how to make it better the next time, because they were not already despite all the odds of accessibility and the inequalities and the ability to hold to use technology as a weapon, but then they're endeavoring, they're learning with each attempt. So I think this happened all over the country. All the teachers, we were not trained how to do this, but the Indian education graduated to the next level of ICT revolution, which was waiting to happen, but it just got kick-started during this pandemic. And we need to salute and acknowledge all the teachers who learn to devise and innovate despite all odds, and just by the sheer grit and the strong will. So National Education Policy 2020 has laid transformative ideas, and teacher training, which needed much focus, especially the 4 years teacher training, which has got much long awaited recognition. And because the integral part in this teacher training 4 years is the teaching practice. So which is the hands-on. A teacher learns not only the philosophical aspect of education or the psychological principles, but he learns how to lead, how to teach in a classroom. So 40%, 30 to 40% of the time is devoted for active learning of the teacher. So this endeavor is a very bold step, which is like happening. It is going to bridge that gap between the knowledge and the practice. The hands-on is going to be strengthened in this. So NEP succeeded in creating that ecosystem for educators and learners to excel. And a lot has been drafted and it has been envisioned. But the second component which I want to highlight is the spirit of humanity in our curriculum. KG to PhD, that needs to be strengthened. The Gurukul model of, or the system of education, which is the blend of the modern scientific education with spiritual rejuvenation, is not much palpable. Now, these are the two core areas around which the pioneer work of the Indian civilization dating back to 1100 BC of Nalanda and Texla was built. The erecting edifice was so strong that the Ivy League universities of today, that is even Cambridge, Oxford, they emulated these models of excellence of Vedic period to give world a coveted model of pedagogical excellence and transdisciplinary research. So this model of excellence started as a center of theology where the spirit of philanthropy and humanity was the nucleus. So as NEP envisions to move from the inspectorial regime of input-centric focus, which is on the lands, on the qualification on the paper, to a more dynamic and vibrant system of learning outcomes and pedagogy, which creates the actual warriors in the classroom. That is like a sage on stage, which we call. So we need to introspect that model of reinventing ourselves, realigning with the rapid change which is occurring in the world today, be it a climate change, be it a machine learning, the artificial intelligence, the COVID crisis. Our learner has to be sensitized to the pain and suffering of millions around him. He has to develop the ability to adapt to these changes. So this will be tested by his coping style and his survival skills. This is a test which happens like every day in our lifetime. It's not the degrees or the certificates which we bury and in neatly in our files. They call for what we have learned, but how we cope up with the changes which is happening. How is our learner surviving those changes? How is he preserving himself? So we need teachers who are not only pedagogically sharp, they are highly competent, but who can create and innovate a curriculum as per the need of the changing time, whatever the geographic location may be. So whatever the individual need of the learner may be, like the concept of differentiation, though the NAP talks about inclusive education, so the concept of differentiation, so differentiation will be in each classroom, whether it's a differentiation in abilities, so the teacher has to respond by having a process of differentiation of teaching learning, so she has to have even a differentiation at the level of assessment. So this has to be given a due credit. And now the teachers have to be trained in addressing these issues. So early years education and primary education can be strengthened if the best trained minds can teach these students. Anganwadi workers, even if they are trained for a few weeks, will not be able to lay the foundation of sensitive, socially, emotionally stable child, and who has a strong civic sense. And he is spiritually kindled in the terms of like his emotional quotient, in the terms of his spiritual intelligence. So because these values which are deep, which are learned early in life, and we call them that they are deeply embedded in our psyche. So these values have to be incorporated in the child before he reaches the age of 6 years. So all the teacher training institutes, all these schools, they have to embed the spiritual values and the emotional intelligence in their curriculum. The modern education or the Western education makes a human being more materialistic, who is more like focused on me and mine. But in order to make this world a beautiful place, we need to shift our focus from mine to thine. And for the sterling qualities to develop, spiritual education based on moral and ethics has to be incorporated in our design of coursework. So education of mind cannot heal the world. If we say that we produce outstanding, competent, and high IQ, intellectually abled individuals or the global citizens for tomorrow, they cannot change the world. The teachers, the human quality of the teachers will keep enriching the lives and the lessons of the learners by their own example. So I as a teacher has to internalize this. So I have to change, and I have to change my DNA. No policy, no reform can change until and unless like I change. So I have to begin this like by myself. And in reality, it is more than the survival of the fittest. It is more like survival of the kindest. If we look at the US model today, and we look at small countries like Denmark, and even if we look at the pandemic, the way they have responded, the small countries did so well because I think they believed in giving and sharing. So the survival of the kindest, and that has also made our species also like, we have survived over the last 2 millennia, maybe because of these qualities, not only because of the qualities of the head. So we need to empower our teachers to this awakening of giving and sharing. So we need to embed the spiritual component in our coursework and in our curriculum across all ranks and disciplines. So thank you.
Beautifully put, Dr. Kaur. I mean, yes, one cannot agree more that, emotional intelligence is something that we really need to, delve deeper into, because that is something that gets missed out in terms of, trying to complete the syllabus, trying to, have a better outcome in the exams. So somehow this loses a little bit of focus. This is something that the EP also talks about. So yeah, so 2 takeaways that you mentioned is first, like, the teacher training. So NEP has talked in detail about teacher training, the need for teacher training, and the different kinds of teacher training. So what you said about addressing the multiple intelligences and the different kinds of children, that is very, very important, because even if you have certain degrees, maybe that doesn't really help you have that, built in, that emotional quotient that is required. And so to cater to all kinds of children, we need to build in that in teachers, and that would come through training. And second important point is that definitely this NEP talks about moving away from rote learning and going to more competency-based, education. So that is something that is again very well put. So definitely, thank you so much for your input. So now, Dr. Ken, would you like to share your inputs on the NEP 2020? Like, what are your takeaways and how do you
Yeah,
think it will shape up the, education system?
certainly, certainly. Before I come to that particular question, answering that question, I'd like to give you a little background. I was just previous to this, an hour before we started, half an hour before we started, I was addressing my old university college in Hyderabad, Usmania University, where I left in my second year, which was actually the third year by the time I finished. I left my studies basically because being a creative person, for me, studying in these silos was rubbing against my grain. You go for chemistry, you go for physics, you go for unit processes, all disintegrated, not at all fragmented, not at all integrated. And for me, I've developed this whole concept of integrated learning. And like the two speakers have stressed, the holistic, not just the mind, but the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. So there's a holistic kind of a thing, and we need to get back this kind of a holistic philosophy that will bring our head, our heart, and our hands together. So for me, as I come then zero in on the NEP, there are two aspects I'd like to talk about, particularly in the early childhood learning, their stress. One is the thing about making learning an interesting experience with a lot of play, with a lot of integration of the arts, and so that the child can develop. You talked about multiple intelligence. It's at that age itself that the child begins to know, I'm interested in art, I'm interested in people, I'm interested in, so there is at that age itself. So the kind of emphasis on the pattern of education at that age, to me, is hopeful. The second thing is the kind of emphasis on the development of the mind, because for me, I remember my whole educational system right from my early childhood. I left my primary school. I didn't like it, so I didn't do any primary school, went straight into middle school. And there it was all these little silos. But I somehow survived. And today I'm surviving because I'm breaking paths so that others could, go in. I am pessimistic about the NEP. While I'm optimistic on the points that I mentioned, there's a pessimism in me. This whole thing of a policy that comes, the money that needs to be invested, the teachers that need to be trained, their whole mind is, structured. So it's very hard. Someone earlier was talking about how easy it was to train your teachers into the online domain. For me, I've been conducting online educational things every week for 500 teachers, and I find it just impossible to turn them away from their particular mindset. So on the one side, I see optimistically there is. Secondly, I see this whole question of, beautiful, colorful policies that come in. It all depends finally on us and the act that will come in. We should see how the curriculum develops and the syllabuses develop, and we've got to wait and see. So optimism on one side, pessimism on the other.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ken. Definitely, like we discussed, that the policy is beautiful in its, but the devil lies in the implementation. So we have to wait and see how it is implemented. We are all very hopeful that there will be a very positive impact on this, because it has come up after so many years. I think the last one came out only in 86, right, if I'm not mistaken. So right, like you rightly said, that it has to. I mean, the NEP focuses on making learning interesting, and it talks about a lot of cognitive development. So those are two focus areas that the NEP has, and obviously teacher training goes hand in hand with that, because that is something that we have to implement. To have the right implementation, teachers will have to be trained in that direction, because so far it has based on certain aspects, which is going to completely change now. So that is something that will take a bit of time, but I think with the right kind of training and with the right kind of mindset, we will be able to achieve that. So thank you so much for sharing your views. Now I would like to come to Mr. Raymond Fernandez. Mr. Fernandez, if you can share your views on the NEP, please.
Thank you so much, Aishi. It's so difficult to follow up after such erudite speakers, but I'll make an attempt. But before I can do that, I would like to congratulate the entire committee that have drafted this policy. There is a spirit of positiveness in the policy. And I'm sure it is going to bring about a much needed resurrection in educational leadership, both in thought and deed. Now, the question actually that you've asked is about a monumental shift. And I was looking at answering this question, but before I could, I want all of us to just look at or make a simple reference to the economic diversity of our country. I'm borrowing from a small blog post that I read some time ago by Neil Miller, learningindia.in, if I'm not mistaken. He's divided India into 4 categories. A majority India that really works hard to make ends meet. A classic India, a middle school families, or middle class families valuing respect and culture among all things. The new India, which is an aspiring, nouveau rich, and therefore aware from the academic point of view, the transcendencies in education. And a wealthy India, of course, the India that really needs no introduction. But this India is aware of what they want, and they always want the best for their children. Now, a recognition of this will help us understand the expectations that we have from education and the kind of schools students from each of these Indias would like to go to. Now, under this backdrop, I was trying to evaluate or read the NEP again, and I just realized that a momentous shift would mean different for different Indias. For the majority India, just the curriculum restructuring to include students of grade 3 and upwards would be a monumental shift, right? Because now foundational education will get some quality benchmarking in a certain sort of expectation. To the classic India, a multidisciplinary and a holistic education may be a game changer. Now you get a formal opportunity to broaden your horizons. To the new and wealthy India and the interspersed between each other, inclusive of fun, year-long vocational crafts may indeed help them deepen their learning and to a certain extent teach them empathy. But if I look at these different Indias and the different impacts it is going to make, the entire policy caught my attention at 2 very small points, and I think they, in my opinion, humble opinion, would be game changers. One is the importance to teacher professional development. And Dr. Kaur and Dr. Ken have made reference to this in terms of their optimism and the pessimism, in terms of how important it is to have these humane qualities to deliver education. I always believe that the chain is as strong as its weakest link. And I don't mean to say that teachers are the weakest link, but if teachers are strengthened, then what they can deliver would be far reaching as compared to the impact that they can have. Now, delivering the vision of the NEP requires good teachers. And the policy, I believe, recognizes that. And the importance of continuous professional development is really paramount. It's very interesting as it is put in the policy. For once, they put in a number to say 50 hours of continuous professional development. If you look at the math, they're doing it roughly about an hour a week, and which is perfectly doable. Now, I'm not saying that schools don't do it, but I'm glad to see that it is present in the policy. Professional development, in my opinion, should not only include content delivery, but to understand national and international practices. Very important for teachers is to get the communication skills right, the leadership, the time management, understand pedagogies which are both local and international, different approaches to learning, understand the learner, interpret assessment outcomes, which is really very important. And I believe that is something that we should be looking at very deeply. And as Dr. Ken said, integrated learning. That's extremely important. All of these are broadly covered in the policy, which is equally heartening that that the recommendations are not only limited to teachers in terms of professional development, they also extend to school leadership. Now, it is imperative in this new age that this policy, which is hoping to usher new leadership, we have people who keep up to date with the changing paradigms globally and locally to reskill themselves. And that is what leaders should be doing. Now, the second aspect that caught my attention, and it makes its mention subtly at multiple places, is the frequent use of technology. Now, I personally believe that technology in education will play a major role moving forward. The current pandemic, however unfortunate, has catalyzed the use of technology in the education space, especially in synchronous content delivery. Now, one may argue that is not the most optimal use or way in which you can possibly deliver technology. But as we were discussing before the seminar could begin, it has thrown teachers into the deep end, and teachers have found a way to come out with flying colors. Now, the policy recognizes the powerfulness of this tool and has very succinctly introduced it in numerous places. Now, technology finds a mention in academic transactions, albeit in terms of languages, and I read that it says that technology will enhance teaching of languages can be enhanced through innovative and experiential and experimental methods such as gamification and apps. It also finds a mention in continuous professional development in order to ensure that each teacher has the flexibility to optimize its own professional development. Opportunities in the form of online teacher development modules must be made available to all teachers. And these are just a few examples that I put before you. But these insertions are important in the context of what we are discussing and bring a big paradigm shift in the way we transact technology. Formative assessment will get a shot in the arm, right, because of the use of technology. The crux of formative assessment is quick, or rather immediate feedback of learning tasks. And this is only possible through technology. Gamification will bring about a sense of ownership and transfer the accountability of learning to the learner. If I can extrapolate this thought, education institute and edtech players must look at creating complete digital ecosystems to accommodate all stakeholders, students, parents, teachers, and institutions, so that they can do two things: share effective, relevant communication regarding academic progress and achieving milestone, and introduce innovative and engaging ways to consume content. If technology as a tool is used effectively, moving from principles to practices will be much simpler. In closing, I would like to submit once again that the spirit of the policy is well documented, and I'm sure it will be put to practice in the same earnestness. With this, thank you very much for your time. I now concede my time to the moderator.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Fernandez. Very well said, actually, because the economical disparity that we have across the country and the diversity that we talked about, that you mentioned, so that is something that has been taken care of in the NEP very well. It has been addressed that all kinds of learners will get equal access to education and to quality education. So if that can be implemented in the right spirit, then obviously, so no child will be left behind. That is the motto of the NEP as well. So exactly, and the teacher training bit is very interesting. It really doesn't just talk about engaging teachers to deliver education to students, but it is also skilling themselves. It talks about a lot about bringing skills, upgrading their skills, so that there's professional development in all directions. So that is something that is really, really very heartening to see for teachers as well. And technology definitely, the pandemic has completely changed how education is delivered across the country. So it has really brought us up to that level that we can talk about India and the education system here, that we can now deliver through online systems. And I don't think it is, it will go away very soon. So blended learning will continue even after the pandemic, because students, teachers, schools, everybody has seen the benefits of this system as well. So thank you so much for putting across your points. So all of us know that, the NEP has talked about many important aspects. And so I would like to thank all of you for your insights. Now coming to Dr. Ken, I wanted to check, ask you that since a lot of focus has been given to early childhood care and education, and it has been made a part of formal schooling now, so what are the changes that you envisage in the ECCE segment with respect to NEP?
Good. I think what I did say, I'm pessimistic on the one side, but optimistic. My optimism is very much at that early childhood level, because children, when they are taught the right way, when they are taught how to learn, they will develop skills themselves. They don't need to be guided very much. They are very much onto this kind of learning. And the NEP has very rightly put that together, at least in that capsule that they've given us on early childhood learning. The play, the arts, the excitement that children need, all of that is there. And so for me, I think that itself is hopeful and will bring the kind of thing that I am looking forward to, the holistic, integrated learning that the child can get onto.
Do you also think that, because now it is integrated in the sense that foundational level, so they have put the 3 years of pre-primary with classes 1 and 2. So usually there was a huge gap in that area that, many children would come from different, economic sections. So maybe they were not all up to that same level when they reached class 1, which is where formal schooling actually began in the country when it comes to government schools and, other institutions. So now that will bring in some kind of equality there when it becomes more formal.
Yes. I think the big mistake that we educators, the blunder that we have committed is to think that even in the primary stage, education can be structured. Children, they want structure, but they are not, their minds are still not able to, they are pliable, they're flexible. And the components, some of the elements within the new education policy lead us to equipping the child in that way. And if the teacher can rightly use these elements within the policy, there is hope. But still, it's a policy. It needs to become an act, and it's only then we act, you see.
Yes, definitely, most definitely. One more question, Dr. Ken. So basically, when we talk about, children in that age group, 3 to 8, so there are some clear elements that the NEP talks about that, it should be play based and, how. So given the class, the size of the class that we have in India, like, do you think it would be implemented? What kind of change do you suggest should happen there, for it to be implemented properly?
Yeah, I think basically you can see the whole classroom size itself is kind of detrimental, goes against this kind of, interesting learning that the NEP is trying to bring in. So I would say what we need is the way forward would be the blended way in which you have referred to, and we continue that way so that the child has a good opportunity. Various children have equal opportunity to develop their own skills. And for me, once again, the primary level has got to be treated as a discovering stage where you discover the child's aptitudes and you build them up so that they can develop further along their own aptitudes.
Yes, absolutely. That's, I mean, because if you do not make it interesting, what you previously said, that if you don't make education interesting for them, the likelihood of dropouts also increases. So that is something that has happened in our country. That,
yeah, I was a dropout at the primary level.
So, and then yeah, so then you attained all the degrees and milestones that you've crossed. So that's great. So I mean, yes, so that is one important factor, right? I mean, because when it doesn't interest you at a very early age, then the likelihood of dropping out increases, and then we talk about the enrollment ratio and we talk about the dropout ratio. So that's pretty skewed in that case. So yes, definitely it would be interesting to see how the policy takes care of that. So thank you so much, Dr. Ken, for sharing your views.
Thank you.
So next question, Dr. Kaur, I have for you is that the policy, if it has to be implemented in true spirit, so we would need extensive teacher training. You have already talked about teacher training. So when the policy actually says that teachers will undergo rigorous training in learner-centric pedagogy, what are your thoughts on teacher training with respect to the NEP? How is it going to change the education landscape?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nidhi. Taking it forward, like we talked about teacher training just now. So teacher training has seen many reforms in the past. What we started in maybe in 70s, the regional centers were opened by NCRT, where they had introduced this 4 years program, which was a blended like BSc, BA plus B.Ed. So it was a 4 years program, and these educators were intensively trained. But somehow it was just, it happened only for a few years. And then in 2000, around 2014, it came up again that we need to follow that model across all our B.Ed colleges. So the B.Ed earlier was a 1 year program, and then it changed from 1 year to 2 years B.Ed. And then from 2 years, then this was adopted 4 years B.Ed, BSc, BA with B.Ed. So it's a 4 years program where the teaching practice or the hands-on teaching is right embedded from the first semester. So if there are 8 semesters, so we are teaching the teacher the subject of teaching methodology so that he understands how to teach his subject, not only to learn his subject, but he also learns how to teach that subject. Now, but lately, very recently, after this 4 years, there was another policy by NCTE, which said that we should have B.Ed, 2 types of B.Ed. One should be for the early years learning and primary students, and one should be for the secondary teachers. So the same 2 years B.Ed, but this B.Ed will be having not only one blanket program, but this will be the 2 compartments. So a primary or a early years trained teacher will be only dealing with those classes. And traditionally the other B.Ed, he will be dealing with the secondary classes. So NCT has been shifting and has been experimenting. And the present policy still says that it will retain the 4 years, but it is also going to let 2 years B.Ed program go on, and even the 1 year B.Ed program also is mentioned that this will be continued, but this will be continued by the teachers who have got ample experience, who are postgraduates. So there is something for everyone. But I think the point which we miss is, like, if we are training our teachers, so we need a specialist teacher. Like we have already, now we've come to know is a person who's a special educator. So rather than having a blanket program, So we need 1 year maybe of a blanket program, but in the another year, it has to be some specializations. Like if you major in the broad sense of education, that is the philosophy of education, the psychology, but there has to be one area of specialization. Like this B.Ed program said, the one which NCTE laid, the two types of B.Ed, not the blanket B.Ed, the primary and the early years, and the secondary. So this is some kind of specialization. So when we visited, like we were there for some days in Columbia Teachers Training College, and I was surprised to find that more than 24 specialist programs were running in that College of Teacher Training. So many of specializations. So one can be a basic course, which is a blanket program, but one has to be a specialist area because we have the diverse need of the learners. He may need only early years specialist will not be able to handle a primary years, or a primary years cannot handle science subject, or science cannot handle mathematics. So this kind of specialization has to be built in. And where the present policy says that they are going to have all these three kinds of B.Ed, but it is not mentioning about this type of the B.Ed which was mentioned by NCTE, like the primary and the secondary. So we hope, I think, maybe the policy comes up like that, where we need specialist teachers. So specialist teacher rather than a blanket program.
Definitely. Yeah, so I think that is something that we all look forward to, that, that will be implemented, that specialization should be there. And also, Dr. Kaur, like, right now, teaching has to be made aspirational, right? I mean, so the NEP does talk about those aspects as well, that, one teacher can actually, through training, move to another level. So that is also aspirational for the teacher, right? So within the same institution, they can move from one level to the other. So if you build in that kind of aspiration, that would also help the teachers to, develop their own skills, enhance their skills.
But I have a point on which I disagree. It's important that you can move, but the movement is not necessarily from kindergarten to primary to secondary to PG. The movement can be anywhere.
Yes.
So rather, it can be from even if you're a PhD, but still you may choose to be an early years trainer. So we have to give self-respect and self-esteem to our early year educator, which sadly we do not give. अच्छा आप कहाँ पे पढ़ाती हो? अच्छा नर्सरी के बच्चों को पढ़ा देती हो, तो वो तो कुछ भी नहीं है अगर नर्सरी के बच्चों को पढ़ाती हो. Whereas we forget that कि सारी foundation is in those 6 years, and how can we undermine that? So that social change has to be there. कि वो तो आंगनवाड़ी वाली भी पढ़ा देगी. उसमें क्या है, गाना ही है, राइम सिखा दिया, गाना कर दिया, but without understanding that all the early attributes of we also have an opportunity. We had an opportunity to work with Leslie Odwin, the one who made that movie India's Daughter, and she launched a beautiful program, Think Equal, which is based on the social emotional learning. So which is only meant for 3 years to 6 years. So we started that program in our 80 schools. So 40 were the experimental schools and 40 were the implementing schools. So we gave them a 1 year of all those inputs in social emotional learning through stories, through different activities. So the idea was to teach the child at that age, from 3 to 6 years, how to be kind, how to feel the pain of the other person. So they came up with the beautiful things like having a kindness chart, kindness tree, the mood meter in each classroom. So all of our 40 schools, they had these things, little things. So a little child who is sad for some reason, the other child goes and hugs him and puts his name in the mood meter up. Like it is in gray, he puts it up. So that is this program, Think Equal, which was jointly run by Ken Robinson, whom we lost recently, and Leslie Odwin. So she got inspired when she was talking to these rapists.
Mm-hmm.
It was intensively interviewing them, and all of them were school dropouts. Now, I'm not talking about Dr. Ken here. So they were school dropouts, and they missed something in their early years education, those values, those morals, those ethics, what we call about the spiritual education. So all these things have to be built in early years education and primary education. So that's our firm belief that we need to strengthen them and give respect to our early year educator and the primary year educator. कि ये नहीं कि तुम तो अच्छा primary में पढ़ाती हो, नहीं, मैं तो professor हूँ ना, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, true. I mean, that's absolutely, you have just hit the nail, on the head by saying that, because we do not give that respect and, expect a lot from them. So, yes, so it is almost like a thankless job. But that is definitely, I mean, the NEP does mention a lot about ECC, and I mean, rightly so. The focus would change, and I think we will all move in that direction where pre-primary will get that importance that it rightly deserves. So exactly. So thank you so much for sharing your views, Dr. Kaur. So next, I would request Mr. Raymond Fernandez. There are lots of appropriate bodies such as the proposed National Assessment Center or PARAK, school boards, NTA, and other identified bodies that will design and implement assessment frameworks. What kind of changes are you anticipating compared to the existing assessment framework that we have, in the school education system?
Honestly, Ragishri, I'm anticipating a very progressive change. But I believe education has 5 important aspects: conceptual understanding, critical thinking, communicating effectively, content mastery, and cultural maturity. Now, the existing framework mostly focuses on putting a numerical value to content mastery. There's nothing incorrect about it, of course, but it's a bit skewed. And it's rightly stated also in the policy that it mainly tests rote memorization. Now, the aspect of this rote memorization has been frequently seen in the policy document as well. Now, education is much more than rote and regurgitation, right? The policy has now put in a thought, right, and made this thought available for all of us. And I'm sure these agencies that you've named and all agencies responsible for assessments will hang on to that thought or hold on to that thought and get the creative aspects out to bring in about different avenues and look at creative ways in coming with good assessments. Now, the worry with assessments, as I see, has always been the credibility and the validity of it. And that'll be quite a challenge moving forward, because to balance standards, to balance maintaining standardization, and to incorporate innovation and creativity will be something that I am really looking forward to seeing in a design assessment. Now, given that, there's a recommendation that assessments will be at the end of grade 3, grade 5, grade 8, along with 10 and 12. This I see as quite a pronounced challenge. And I would like to wait and see how they would come about with these assessments. Of course, there are very varied schools of thoughts on assessments at this age. And I think the policy has also said it very clearly that it is going to be diagnostic in nature to evaluate the progression of academia and not only wait for grade 10 and 12. And that's a really good thought. But what I would like to see in assessment tools is are thoughts like case studies. I would like to see secondary research essays. I would like to see research presentations. Now, the advantages of such assessments is that they are rubric based and they provide a well-rounded picture and analysis of the student's ability to think creatively and communicate effectively. Now, critical thinking and effective communication are much needed skills, not only in the 21st century. Of course, they've been extremely pronounced that they are much required 21st century skills, although we're 20 years into the 21st century. Of course, these tools are better suited, if you may argue, for middle and senior school. But with creative enterprise, I'm very certain we can put it to test at younger ages too. That's debatable though, and I will rest it for now. Coming to a broader aspect of the assessment framework, I anticipate there to be a very comprehensive representation of the student's journey throughout the year. And I hope that it will capture the glimpses of all the 5 aspects of education that I mentioned earlier. At school, we do a lot of work to sensitize students to cultural maturity. And I'll tell you what I mean by cultural maturity. By cultural maturity, I mean an all-encompassing idea of values, skill development, creative exploits, which include scholastic subjects such as arts, sports, and drama and music, and clubs. Now, when a child indulges in these exploits, how he behaves, how he conducts himself, how he displays leadership and initiative are all an integral and important part of growing up. And therefore, becoming a good citizen is what stems out from all these learnings that we get in school. And I would love to see such comprehensive capturing of all these assessments in a reporting framework. Progressive schools, in my opinion, will be those schools which can capture these aspects of growth and development alongside academic rigor. Now, it is heartening to read that the primary purpose of assessments in the NEP is an assessment for learning. Now, if you read between the lines out here, and at the expense of repeating myself, there are 2 very progressive ideas that come out here. One is the extensive use of technology. Because for assessment for learning, you will really need technology if you do not want to overburden the teachers with more correction than they already have. And the second aspect that raises its head out here is a data-driven approach to improving learning. Now, these 2 aspects will steer the progress of the school in the right direction. Now, as I've said earlier also, I think a sizable investment of time, effort, and resources must go into designing digital ecosystems that will help institutions achieve this dream. Now, the assessment framework also aims at reducing the anxiety and pressure of board exams. How does it do that? By greater flexibility of subject choices and different levels of papers, standard and higher level. Now, these are welcoming recommendations, and they are at par with international standards. But reducing high stake status of the board exam may require a little more than providing just 2 attempts. And this is my belief. Another aspect that I'm really waiting with great anticipation is the sharing of best practices between school boards with regards to assessment patterns. Now, once again, in my opinion, it's a great step that will bring a bit of parity across boards. Now, the policy document is comprehensive and it covers multiple aspects of assessment. But as we all know, from policy to practice, if the implementation is in letter and in spirit, it, in my opinion, will place us at par with international institutions. And that's my submission about assessments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fernandez. Yes, obviously all of us are waiting to see how it unfolds, because this is a very crucial area where all of us, the policy promises moving away from rote learning to conceptual understanding and testing students based on that. So, and it also talks about skill development, just not the marks that they get, the grades that they get in the exams, but also how they have, different aspects. For example, how they have performed in a particular, like maybe some vocational subject, that will also contribute to their overall assessment. So those are interesting aspects that the NEP talks about. So, so we are all waiting for that to unfold. And definitely what you mentioned, that parity of boards and bringing the best practices from each, and, having a uniform assessment system. So that is, I think, the role of these agencies as well, that the government is planning. So thank you so much for your views. Next, Mrs. Molek, I have a question for you. The early implementation of the 3-language formula to promote multilingualism is spoken about in the NEP. How do you think this will be implemented? And especially like, you are from West Bengal and we already have that 3-language formula. So how do you answer? Yes.
It is the 3-language formula we do have. The policy says 3-language formula to be implemented and will have the same level from the foundation stage itself. At present, we don't have the same level. It is the first language, second language, and the third language. But the policy declares that it has to have the same level for 3 languages. Now, in my view, how the implementation can be done is that we first need to understand the 3-language formula. What does it mean? Does it mean the medium of instruction or learning language? If it is language learning through speaking, reading, writing in 3 languages right from the foundation level, it will be difficult to implement at the present day infrastructure that we have. We need to, even in cities, have very highly qualified, trained teachers in all languages. Like it is also mentioned in the NEP that it will be all 3 Indian languages. So it cannot go state to state that only English, Bengali, Hindi. If it is all Indian languages that a child needs to learn, in West Bengal also a child might choose to learn Marathi.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need highly trained teachers in all languages in that, if we think of in that aspect. In cities, then what about the remote areas of the country or in villages? Like according to RTE, all are getting the same facility. Okay, that is one of the questions that has come into my mind that I couldn't get any answer to. And we know that children learn, grasp, and the concepts quickly, very fast in their early ages, like in the fundamental age 3 to 8, and they grasp more easily in their home language. They grasp whatever you want to teach, they grasp it in home language more easily in classroom activities. And I believe in schools where we find a little bit of first-generation students, it is already being done. A teacher tries to make the child understand in not only, even if the medium of instruction is in English, not only they teach in English, but they are bilingual. They try to see that the child learns the subject properly. English is the medium of instruction in all private schools in the cities, and children they learn another language or 2 more languages in their curriculum. But their levels are not same. I've already mentioned that. Now, the new policy is very much welcome to us. We are really looking forward to it, provided a proper syllabus, the curriculum is prepared, which is equal to all, especially the foundation stage, to take up 3 languages of the same level and not become a burden on them, burden on the learners.
Yeah.
In my opinion, if stress is given on listening, speaking, and reading in the pre-primary classes, and gradually proceed to writing with skill-based activities in all 3 languages, it will give a better impact on the learning system. And by the time they reach the preparatory stage and proceed to the middle stage, they will be thorough in all the languages. It will be easier for them, okay? We also need to keep in mind the assessment system that just now Mr. Fernandez has mentioned. The present system is mostly based on the rote learning and peer pressure, parents' pressure, the school pressure. And as per as the policy goes, if the assessment system is really made easy, graded, and there is a flexibility also in the languages, proficiency language will need, they say they will be only testing the basic proficiency of each language. I think it is really a very unique thing for the child to learn 3 languages together in a go. But I have a few questions more. Like, what happens when a child gets transferred, father gets transferred to another state in the middle of their fundamental classes? Then what happens? Does the child get the same subject options when he goes to another state? Suppose a child goes from West Bengal to Maharashtra or Gujarat or Punjab, to the 3 languages that they were already following in, say, in standard 5, he goes to any of the changes, the state. Does he get a chance to have all those 3 languages, means other than English, 2 languages? Yeah. Does he get that freedom to still go on with his language curriculum? And his home language to guide him, does he get the home language also? Because it very specifically NEP says that a child gets the guidance of the home language to be to make him free in his classroom. Yeah. Okay. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a lot more to think about, but it is really a good proposition. And let us hope that we, as early as possible, we can implement all the sectors as early as possible, especially for the school children. Especially for the school children, I feel this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mullik. Yeah, I think really we will need more clarity on this, that how
yes.
A child, because as you rightly said, that moving from one state to the other, or even from one school to the other, whether they will be able to allow the choice to follow the same languages. So
follow the same language.
Yes.
Right.
So we will all have to wait and see what what the
But we are all looking forward to.
Yes,
because
exactly.
It's a fantastic policy that has come up.
Yes. And so to get more guidance and how to implement these different aspects.
And Dr. Neelam Kaur has really spoken my heart out regarding the teachers' training. It is really required, and not only training as per getting degrees, or as she said, it is your mind, it is your own self to feel for the child, and that is the real training, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you everyone so much, and because of time, so we will probably take a couple of questions, and I will throw it open to the complete panel, and you can let me know who wants to take that up. So we have one question, which is that the NEP states that the development of vocational capacities will go hand in hand with the development of academic or other capacities. How do you think this will be implemented? So vocational is something that is made mandatory from classes 6 to 8, that every child undergo one vocational subject training. So what do you think will be the impact of this, and how do you think this will be implemented? So it is open to everyone, all the panelists. So anyone who wants to take this up can take it up.
Yes, Dr. Kim, go ahead.
Dr. Kim.
So carry on.
For me, I have been really thinking very, very hard that entrepreneurship needs to be developed within the school system itself. And not just, money-making entrepreneurship, but helping children think outside the box, look at opportunities. And the critical thinking that Raymond was mentioning, give to them at that early stage. All of these, therefore, will help that vocational skill to develop much more kind of holistically, much more in a productive way, rather than just looking at giving a skill that later on would be forgotten. It has to be put within them, and that sense of entrepreneurship must develop from that early age.
Yes. So the NEP does mention that, it also talks about dignity of labor, that, because it also helps students become aware, and it is an important policy, it's important aspect in terms of developing or sensitizing them to different kinds of vocational subjects. So for example, they talk about carpentry, they talk about gardening, they talk about different vocational subjects. So yes, we will, it really opens up a lot for students to explore and, get into, without getting into the fixed mindsets of not exploring those avenues at all. So thank you so much, everyone. Do we have any questions?
So, Rageshri, there is a question on Zoom. It is fun course possible in rural areas where students are from below poverty line? Will there be role of universities in the future? Okay.
So, Dr. Kaur, would you like to take that up?
Yeah.
Because you have been, you have been a pioneer in that. So, yes, please.
So can you repeat the question here?
Yes. Shrikant, could you please repeat the question?
Yes. So the question is from Ms. Amandeep Kaur, and the question is fun courses possible in rural areas where students are from below poverty line? What will the role of universities be in the future?
So in rural areas, so how to integrate fun learning into the main courses? Yeah.
Now there are two things. I think the question raises 2 points. One is she wants something to know about fun learning, or so actually there is nothing like that as a fun learning. Is not defined as such anywhere. What is fun learning? So what we as educators, we believe that all the learning has to be in a manner which is very comforting, and it's like it's a delight for the learner as well as for the teachers. So there are no such thing like a fun learning. Like across the denominator of teaching our subject with much like passion and drive and incorporating maybe what she wants to say, the playful learning of the early years. So that maybe in the rural areas, if she's talking about that. But what I would like to say is that in the rural areas, the children, when we were trying to compare our early years curriculum, which happens in brick and mortar structure, or what happens to a child in a rural background who has not gone to a formal school. But what we have seen is the learning outcomes. The child who has been out in the nature, and he was in a joint family setup. Perhaps he learned more in that setup than what he learned in this cement structure. because the child was learning, and he was learning like all for all his motor development. He's climbing all the trees, learning to pluck fruits and flowers, and then he's playing in the water with the ducks, with butterflies, with little birds, and he's seeing the milking happening, and he's coming in contact with the family members, dadima, nanima, for all those stories of wisdom.
Yes.
So whatever we are trying to give to the child in that structure, this child is getting by default there. And what we are trying to give it by design in a classroom setup, which can never be as powerful as that. So whatever he was doing, like the clay modeling, he's playing with the mitti all the time. So there is no need to have a clay modeling thing. He's playing with the water. So there is no need to have a swimming pool or something. We make something to play with the water. So whatever was happening with him was in a natural setup, but he was surrounded by people who cared for him. Those were the people who were enriching him by like little stories which carried a lot of wisdom. Now that part was missing in our structured early years curriculum. Now when we are going to design that, we talk about all these things, but really how to put it in one bag and then to implement. And then maybe the researchers have to compare the two setups and find out like which one was the best. But with this nuclear families, with the parents do not have that option of leaving the child with the family, and they do not have the option of all these things. So it becomes a challenge. And the second question which he was asking is, what is the future of the universities in the rural area? The rural areas, in fact, a lot of universities in the past have come up in the rural areas just because I think they get a lot of space there, and there is a lot of the land there is maybe less expensive than in the big cities. And all those some of those models have been very successful. The universities in the rural areas. Both the universities are in the deep rural pockets, and though we have a struggle for the human resource, but whenever they come and join, and we feel that there is a lot of opportunity in the rural setup, which is in the nature. So the challenge will always remain. That same challenge of poaching is there in the cities also. So they also get their staff staff, they are also not able to retain the staff. So other than that, the opportunity is there for a good rural university to develop. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think experiential learning is like really happening in those areas, right? So we talk about experiential learning in the curriculum, but actually when you go to those rural areas, what you mentioned just now is actually learning by doing. So yes, so exactly. So I think that is all the time that we have today. So thank you to all the panelists for joining us and sharing your insights. We definitely have certain takeaways from today, and one is survival of the kindest. So thank you so much for giving us that praise, Dr. Kaur. And we talked about empathy, we talked about integrated learning, we talked about integration of technology, we talked about the importance of ECCE and teacher training. So yes, these are some key aspects that the NEP talks about, and we will see how those are implemented. So thank you all for joining us today, and we would take leave from you. Have a good evening. Thank you to all the participants, and thank you to all the viewers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.